The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 121.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
It's when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear. It seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Position healers. Wearing a bit thin.
Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. Today we're discussing the 6th Doctor story, Vengeance on Varos. And joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook. At our Facebook page, Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN. Please leave us comments. Subscribe to the show. If you have not yet subscribed, you should subscribe to make sure you get every episode. Subscribe on your phone in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or YouTube, where you should hit the bell to get notifications. And above all, share the podcast with your friends. Help us grow this community of Doctor Who fans, especially in this period between new seasons. We want to keep the conversation going. We have lots of great content we're discussing of old, classic, and relatively new Doctor Who. In fact, next week, as a preview, we're going to be discussing one of the all-time favorite episodes for people. We'll be talking about Blink. Yes, the Weeping Angels. Yeah. And the podcast is the best way to experience that, because then you don't accidentally show an image of them. Except I'm going to put an image of the Weeping Angel on your phone for the podcast.
Don't look at your phone.
Don't look at your phone. But that's not what we're talking about this week. And by the way, at the end of this episode, we do have feedback from listeners that we wanted to share with you and discuss. So we'll get to that as well. So stick around for that. But this week, we're talking about Vengeance on Varos, which is a 6th Doctor episode or show.
The
story.
second.
The what?
The second 6th Doctor story.
Yes.
So it's the one after his regeneration.
No.
Well,
actually,
it's the third post-regeneration story.
It's after. Well, we did what was before it was. No, there was one.
Cybermen.
The Twin Dilemma.
The Twin Dilemma,
and then there's the Cybermen, and then this one.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So I guess it's the third. It's still early days. The bad news, this is one of the better ones.
Yes.
Yes. And in fact, it wasn't. It's faint praise, damning with faint praise. It wasn't that bad, but it's
really
not. It's not. I mean, relatively, it's not that bad. Let's put it
it's
that
comparative.
Way.
It's comparative.
There are moments in this story that were.
It's got things to think about, and it's got things that we will obviously be able to discuss, but it's still Colin Baker.
Yeah. Well, let me throw the background out there before we get into the discussion too much. But this was aired January of 1985. It's we're in the season 22, the 6th. Season 22, and it's still this regeneration happened midway through the season. That's this one, right?
It was.
Yeah.
It was season 21. It was the last season was when he regenerated, and then there's one more. There was the post-regeneration episode, and then went into between season break.
Okay, and so this is so this is the second serial of the 22nd season in 1985, where we still have Perry as the companion. I don't know why she's sticking around, but we'll get to that. And it's 2 episodes, and that's the thing I wanted to kind of mention was we've shifted classically, who it was multiple 2 or more 22-minute episodes.
Right.
But for this season, for the 6th Doctor, they switched to 2 45-minute episodes, but they only did it for this season.
Which is interesting because, of course, that's what Modern Who, New Who has been pretty much since it came out. And that was one of the concerns that people raised. It's like, well, why are they going to 45-minute episodes? Well, Classic Who did it for a season. Now, the difference is Modern Who does it as, like one story, 45 minutes.
Right.
And
with
occasionally we have like two-parters or three-parters. But Classic Who, it was still a serial. It was just a two-parter with one exception. There's the Two Doctors episode is coming up here in a couple of serials, and that was a three-parter. Okay.
Yeah. And then so they did that for a while, but then they went back to the old way. What do you know why they switched and went back?
The BBC insisted. They didn't like the way things were going, and they put the series on hiatus to retool it. And one of the conditions for it coming back was they wanted the 25-minute episodes again.
Okay. All right. So after this season, they put it on hiatus for a period of time. Okay.
Just about a year and a half.
Okay. So. Well, which is about as long as we usually have to wait nowadays.
Yeah.
Well, now we do, but back then it was new to have a break that long. People thought it had been canceled. There are rumors that it was canceled, but they were using the hiatus as an excuse, saying, "Oh, it'll be back." Yeah, wink, wink. But then they did bring it back.
Well, kind of like after 1989.
Yeah.
Incidentally, the Father Corey mentioned it is Colin Baker, and that's true, but I would qualify it is Colin Baker on TV. He's much better in the audios. Big Finish is where he really gets to shine. They give him good material to work with as opposed to what he was being given here on TV.
And that's part of that's part of the problem, and you see that right at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah, I think it's the writing more so than the acting that's the problem here. To tie closed on the 45-minute length. If you are old enough to remember watching it in America when it was originally airing here, you're probably saying, no, it was 22-minute episodes. Well, they repackaged them into 4 25-minute episodes when they were broadcast in America and Australia.
Unless you watched it the way I did, where they did them as the movie format, where they took all the serial and put it into one big movie.
One big
every
story.
Week.
Okay, that's an interesting way. Preferable, frankly, from my point of view, to get them all together and get the whole story without having to.
It's kind of almost anticipating binge watching. Which is kind of funny because it's almost anticipating binge watching that we do now. Because like when we sat down and watched this serial, we all I'm sure the three of us sat down and binged it.
Yes. So speaking of the style of TV, what we actually see an early version in this, essentially, of reality TV. Although there were other examples of this in the era, and I'll get into what I mean in a second. But Running Man, the Schwarzenegger movie,
that's
features
what I thought of too,
something like that. And then what was the Max Headroom TV series, which is short-lived, but also included something along these lines. So people were thinking of what if we had the gladiatorial combat of Roman era on TV today, and
which
frankly,
Star Trek actually did in the 60s.
I was going to say, right. Star Trek also did that as well.
So we open on the planet Varos. We later learn it's the 23rd century. Varos is a former penal colony that's now a mining planet. It has domes. I guess it's so because there's a hostile environment or something. And as we open, we are watching a guy who's on television on Varos, and he's being tortured by people shining a flashlight on him. And we get lots of reaction shots of this married couple who are watching what's on their TV screens. They're either watching him being tortured, they're hoping they're going to get an execution soon, they're watching the governor. And so you have a lot of this interaction as a kind of social commentary about people's relationships with their televisions. And it's really hard for me not to think that this is almost like a Robert Holmes thing. It's not by Robert Holmes, but it has that kind of same dark social commentary that a Robert Holmes episode would have, only he would do it better. And most of the time, I mean, he did write The Space Pirates. But you have this kind of Nazi-esque aesthetic that the government has. They're waltzing around with black and gray uniforms with Nazi-looking symbols on them, and so they're clearly fascists. This is a dystopia, but they're also the people controlling the television. And we meet this guy who's like got a mask that covers half of his face, and he's horribly scarred, and he's their chief developer of programming. And so I'm thinking this is like a statement about the BBC and British government television, and what people are watching at home. And one of the criticisms of Doctor Who at the time was that it was way too dark and violent for children. There was a famous British crusader named Mary Whitehouse who had this kind of tea time torture for tots campaign against Doctor Who, and this serial provoked a lot of people, not just Mary Whitehouse, but a lot of people saying the series is too dark and scary now. But I think that there's something, I think they're playing on their own reputation. I think this serial is kind of a self-parody of Doctor Who and its darkness and Britain's television situation and the way people just drink in what's given to them on television, no matter how dark it is.
I think there's also an element in this of, again, this is 1985, so January of 1985. So being produced in the year 1984, which was also in pop culture. We remember George Orwell's 1984. Lots of people talking about that year, which featured Big Brother and TV sets in every room, and that watch you, and that were mandatory for you to watch if you did not watch it. And that comes up. So let's talk about this. There's this bickering couple. Edda and what's their name?
Arita, I believe.
Arak and Edda.
Arak, okay.
Yep. And
Arita was the other another gal.
And so we have a dictatorial government, torture is entertainment, voting is mandatory, punishment is swift, and there are many shortages. It's Venezuela, frankly. No, just kidding.
It is very much like Orwell's 1984, though. All those elements are there.
And they never interact with the rest of the cast. Every part of their interaction with the story is only through what they see on this screen, and we occasionally go back to them every once in a while. And they very much function sort of like a Greek chorus, which I thought was interesting. And that's one of the elements I thought was an interesting, that made this story a little better than the average Sixth Doctor story. It was clever. I thought that was a clever. I liked that interaction they had. It was kind of a funny, bickering couple sort of story.
By the way, I just want to point out real quick, Edda was played by Sheila Reed, who also played Gran on Time of the Time Lord. She was Clara's grandmother.
Clara's grandmother. Nice. Good
Time
find.
of the Doctor.
Time of the Doctor. Yeah, sorry.
Time of the Doctor.
Time of the Doctor. I was thinking of Trial of the Time Lord, Time of the Doctor. Got them switched. I just wanted to throw that out real quick because I knew she looked familiar, and that's why.
One of the things that I thought was interesting here that was very meta is one of the cliches of Doctor Who is running through corridors as a way of filling television time. And so in this episode, we have lots of the Doctor running through corridors being seen on television with the with the couple watching him. And the woman is like, "Ooh, I like the one in the funny clothes."
So speaking of also of actors, the famous actors getting their start here, the young man, the rebel John Dar, who's being tortured, is Jason Connery. That name's familiar to you. He's the son of Sean Connery, James Bond, but also
you might have heard of him. Yeah.
But he's also famous in his own right. He was his most famous role was in the British show Robin Hood that started airing just after he appeared in this episode of Doctor Who. So he was mostly unknown at this point, but he became very famous soon after.
And he's done a lot of production and stuff like that since too. So
yes. So Jason Connery. So just another example of every famous British actor eventually shows up on Doctor Who at some point.
Exactly.
So we get this torture scene, and then we cut to the Doctor and Perry still bickering. So we had the bickering couple, Eric and Edda. Now we have the bickering Doctor and companion as she enumerates all his faults. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself as I'm watching this, why is she still traveling with him? Like, it's not like she's stuck with him. Like, they can't get back to Earth. Like, they don't like each other. At
the moment, they can't get back to Earth because the TARDIS has run out of power.
Well, right. Like immediately after this, they runs out of power. But like, just in the general sense, like that they just don't like each other, and it makes the show different. You know, when Donna shows up with the 10th Doctor, David Tennant, it's not like they like each other, but they're not, you know, boyfriend girlfriend like Rose or Martha Jones, you know, that sort of thing. But they enjoy each other's company, and they still sort of bicker a little bit, but it's fun.
A little bit.
This is not fun.
But
This is one of the things that's been pointed out, that in New Who, the companions virtually worship the Doctor. I mean, he's the most wonderful man. He is all that in a bag of chips. He is just everything to them. That is not always the case in Classic Who. In Classic Who, you got a range of attitudes. The companions, by and large, with maybe the exception of Perry here, did like the Doctor. And even Perry eventually comes to like him, but they didn't worship him in the same way, and it's frankly refreshing to have characters who aren't as impressed with the Doctor as he is with himself. And Donna gives us a little bit of that in New Who.
Right. She does bring him down a peg, and I prefer the way they do it there, where she kind of grounds him a bit. This one just is, they don't like each other.
No, this is unpleasant. It's
and again,
bad writing.
This goes back to the writing, because, you know, later on in the episode, it becomes clear that she does like him, at least, you know, is grateful for him and everything. But it doesn't show up at the beginning, where she's basically nagging him. And I hate to say it. And that's really what it was. You know?
She's nagging him.
And it goes on for way too long.
Yes.
I mean, keep coming back to the TARDIS, and they're still, you know, dead in the water.
I did like the line about, you know, you burnt my dinner. It was supposed to be a cold dinner.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's, and something Jimmy alluded to, is we start with this situation where the TARDIS stalls, runs out of gas in the middle of nowhere in space, where it doesn't have this vital element, Zyton 7, which can only be found conveniently in one place,
which is ridiculous. It's just.
In all of time and space.
Stupid writing. In all of time and space, the Time Lords are going to make themselves dependent on this thing that's alternately described as an element and a mineral that's only found in this one place and can't be synthesized for some reason. It's like, guys, come on, we have cyclotrons here on Earth, and we had them in the 20th century. We can make elements.
Right. So, and I mean, for us, it's you know, alchemy is still difficult. But for Time Lords, I mean, come on, you've invented the TARDIS. You know, you can do this, right? So it's a contrivance in order to start the plot off.
Also, given the Nazi overtones and the dystopia and the darkness in this series, I couldn't help wondering if Zyton B is somehow related to Zyklon, or Zyton 7 is somehow related to Zyklon B, which was the chemical the Nazis used during the Holocaust.
Interesting. It
might have been a tip to it. Yeah.
Right. There's nothing explicit in the show to tell us that, but
just the sound of the name, but in the Nazi-esque context.
Yep.
That's right. So the other thing that's kind of weird is how the Doctor's like, oh well, we're gonna die here, or you know, eventually you first, because I'll have regenerations, and he just kind of gives up and waits to die. And it's like, really? Is this who the 6th Doctor is? He's the one who, when he encounters a problem, he gives up and waits to die? Oh.
Pretty much.
I mean, it just seems so like out of character. For all the Doctors.
Especially since obviously it was a power issue, but there was still enough power to keep like life support and food production and all that other kind of stuff going.
And to get the Varos.
Indefinitely, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, they could get the Varos too. So, you know, what I don't know. It was, it was weird.
Well, they eventually get to Varos, but for that to happen, you know, events happen that cause the Doctor to regain hope. And then he's like, right. Perry, don't lose hope. And she was the one who had been trying to keep him from losing hope. So
basically
irony for the audience there.
Throwing the TARDIS user manual, which is surprisingly small for all the things that the TARDIS can do.
Exactly. And surprisingly analog.
It is the size of an LA phone book, but
right.
Yeah. But for the fact that this is, a super advanced space-time machine, you think it could do a little more. Maybe that's just volume 1.
This video is volume 1. So meanwhile, on Varos, we have this drama, this political conflict going on between. So the planet is run by the people on the planet, and they mine the Zyton and sell it to the Galatron Mining Corporation that holds an exclusive contract, apparently, to buy it. Mm-hmm. And they're under new contract negotiations. This is compelling stuff, folks. Contract negotiations.
There's been a trade dispute involving taxation of outlying routes. Yeah.
Exactly. This never goes well. George Lucas should have learned from this, as from a storytelling perspective, going over economics. So we have the supremely strange and disturbing figure of Syl, who's the representative of Galatron, with the governor.
Syl is our main villain in this episode, in addition to the Nazis, and he's kind of reptilian, but he's also kind of insect-like. He's like a little slug guy. He's played by a very short actor who's a Jordanian British guy named Nabil something. And and he's very physically small, and he sits on this kind of tabletop of a portable table that's carried around by attendants or moved around by attendants. And he also needs to be moisturized periodically. So we have this Lady Cassandra like moment, only it's water me instead of moisturize me.
Exactly.
But he's apparently from some kind of like swamp like planet or something. And he has this thing he does with his tongue. He's got this tick where he like rapidly licks his lips. It's like, only I can't do it. And he actually was popular enough. They brought him back. So there's more Syl in our future, and even more in the audios.
Are we sure he was popular enough to bring him back, or is he more like the Slithines, where the writers liked him a lot more than the audience did?
He was popular enough with the writers. His species, by the way, is he's a mentor. That's the name of his species, and he's trying to strike this business deal with the governor. And he's keeping the prices of Zyton really low. For some reason, the Varosians have not realized we're the only source of this vital mineral in the whole universe, so we can charge whatever we want. They have not realized that. So he's like forcing starvation conditions on these people by keeping the price artificially low.
I kind of see that as plausible, though, because this was a prison planet. And as it's revealed later on in the episode, that the people who live there are just descendants of the original prisoners. It's kind of like, Australia was originally. Right. And so it's plausible that they've been so cut off from the rest of the galaxy that they don't realize that what they have there is quite valuable, and they are the only source. So I can see that as plausible.
Mm-hmm. And Syl also has an inside man who's who's helping him with this exclusivity and undermining the governor. He's the chief officer. He's the chief law enforcement officer, and sort of deputy to the governor, I guess. But he's the inside man.
And in addition to exporting Zyton 7, they're also trying to export snuff films to other places based on their public TV executions. What I find interesting is the politics of Varos, because apparently, so not only is voting mandatory, but there are real consequences for the governor. If he loses a vote, he gets exposed to this cellular disintegration torture ray that nobody has survived more than 4 times. So as he gets less popular and people do have a free vote against him, he's eventually going to die. And there are situations in which an election can be forced, even when he doesn't want one, which then happens in part 2 of this. But and then when a governor dies, they take the names of the top 12 other Nazi-esque officials, and randomly select one. And the idea is that if you know your life is on the line, you're going to be better motivated to find solutions for these people. And so even though it's a dystopia with accountability. And as negative, as dark as it is, they've got the pieces in place that in the real world would lead to an improvement of their situation. So it's kind of interesting to me conceptually that, I mean, if you have accountability going on to the people that's real and has teeth, that actually will motivate leaders to improve your situation in the long term.
It motivates leaders to provide solutions that are popular. I don't want to get too much into political theory here, but that's actually something the governor eventually realizes is there are no popular solutions to the difficulties he faces. And so he has, sometimes a leader has to make an unpopular decision that eventually proves to be right. But in the moment, the people would vote against. So,
for example, he tried to have people vote down to reduce their food rations. And of course, they're not going to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There will be mistakes made in the selection process, both by leaders and by the people. They'll both make stupid mistakes, but in the long run, having leaders with accountability is going to produce better results than leaders with no accountability.
It's not just a totalitarian regime where the leaders stay in power as long as they hold the guns, so to be honest. They have
it's a dark democracy in the sense of a democracy as mob rule. It's not a republic,
right? And in fact, the governor and the chief officer, they decide to use an execution of this rebel Jandar, the guy who was being tortured at the beginning of the episode,
with the flashlight.
Right. To distract the voters and keep him from having to undergo another vote while he's working on this renegotiation of the contract with Galatron. And also, like you said, trying to sell videos of their executions and tortures to be a side hustle for the planet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then we're introduced to Arita, who's Jondar's wife, who's in prison, and Rondell, who gets almost no time. I expected him to have a bigger role than he eventually has. He's Jondar's former best friend who is now a guard with the government and
dies quickly.
Quickly, having done the right thing by helping them escape from prison. But
from the goofy Nazi golf cart that's chasing them.
Very slow golf cart.
You can Let's get in this golf cart faster than those things.
Well, quick, everybody on board the golf cart so we can go very slowly down this corridor and then get off in 15 feet. That happens more than once. Her narrative reveals that this was originally the prison planet for the criminally insane. That's actually an element that we didn't talk before. This wasn't just a prison planet for anybody. The criminally insane were sent to this prison planet. And the descendants of the original officers and guards are the ones who are running things and live in relative luxury, while the descendants of the inmates are the ones who are the workers.
And perhaps related to the fact it was for the criminally insane, they have this torture dome where they have all the prisoners of society. And one of the ways they torture them is by having the computer or whatever generate hallucinations for these people. So they're allowed to kind of, to some degree, wander around freely, most of them. They're not all chained up or in cells, and they're encountering these hallucinations. And their encounters are then broadcast on television and saved for export to other cultures as entertainment.
Right. They're given the hope of escape if you can only just find the right way out, which, of course,
which is like the Running Man.
Yes, exactly. It's demonic in a sense. So we have Jondar's execution is about to go down, and the TARDIS materializes in the execution chamber. The guard thinks, speaking of hallucinations, the guard thinks he's experiencing one of these hallucinations. And so the Doctor and Perry trick the guard and free Jandar. And this guard will be important later on at the end.
Then they go on a runabout through corridors and encounter hallucinations of giant flies and green lights and other things.
Yeah, Rondo gets killed.
The TARDIS gets taken.
The BBC must have had a documentary on flies at some point, and they reused some of the footage from that.
Yes. So we have TARDIS separation and then Doctor separation. The TARDIS is taken to the control room. Then the Doctor and the others are separated. So the Doctor ends up hallucinating a desert, and the hallucination is so real that his body thinks that it is dying of thirst, and he collapses, and everyone thinks he's dead. And cut to commercial. Apparently, is what they do.
End of part one.
End of part one.
The Doctor is dead.
Right.
They were told.
Yes.
Beginning of part two.
Part two.
Turns out he's not dead, but they think he is. They take him to the body disposal area where they're going to dump him in a vat of acid to dispose of his body. Only first they dump what looks like another corpse in a body bag into the acid, and it's not clear to me, is that meant to be another corpse? Because one of the characters says that they always do that to show the viewing audience that the acid is real. So maybe that's not a maybe it's not a
prisoner.
Or in the body bag.
Yeah. I mean, it could be just someone who died of natural causes that they were disposing of a body, or even just,
or it could
anything.
be a prop.
A prop, yeah.
Exactly.
But they start to dump the Doctor, and he wakes up, and they both fall in the acid. And there was a huge controversy in, I guess, the pre-DVD days or pre-video days of, did he push them into the acid? But you watch it carefully, and he's actually... One of the guards just falls in the acid and dies, and then he pulls the other guard in, except the Doctor is kind of defending himself. He's like using a cot to shove the other guard towards the acid. So there's some unclarity about, is the Doctor trying to kill the guy? But what actually kills him is the other guard reaches out disfigured from the acid and yanks him in, as he tries to get out and fails.
Right. Now, the Doctor does make a quip about not joining them before he leaves. He does seem very callous, and this is one of those things where people thought that this made it a very dark, violent episode. Was how callous the Doctor was.
I didn't really take it. I know people did take it that way. I didn't. I just took it as like a James Bond type quip, and frankly, I mean, if I was in that situation, someone just tried to kill me and then they pulled themselves into the acid, I could say, forgive me if I don't join you.
Right. So the Doctor, to no avail, the Doctor's recaptured. He's going to be executed in the old-fashioned way by hanging, along with Jandar. But Perry and these names, I can't remember the difference. Attar, Jandar's wife, I forget the
Areta.
Exactly.
Areta.
I'm going to call her Aretha just so I remember it. So Perry and Aretha end up in the mutilator, the mutator, which is
mutilator. That's rather appropriate slip.
It's just a weird device that transmutes people into other things.
Based on their fears.
Fears.
What you fear is what you become. So it's kind of body horror.
Perry is afraid of birds or something.
Apparently.
Her fear is that she wants to escape and fly away. And doesn't everybody in that situation?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a strange sequence because they have this elaborate makeup that they gradually apply to both women. And then they wake them up and they're not, they turned off the machine just in time and now they're better.
It fades away again.
Well, it fades back, yeah. And Areta, part of me is disappointed, but part of me likes the fact that what Areta is turning into is not identifiable as any clearly earthly animal. It's kind of reptilian or kind of amphibian, but you can't really tell.
Syl kind of likes it.
Syl likes it, yeah.
She's finally becoming attractive.
So that's what they do to the women. For the men, they were going to do this hanging.
Yeah.
And they have these like religious order of priests there at the execution who worship the great video of Varos.
Yeah.
If you listen to their chanting.
Well, I love the priest looked almost Eastern Orthodox or Eastern Catholic, and the monks looked like Franciscans, but just with black habits instead of brown.
They're Dominicans.
Well, someone went to the BBC wardrobe department dress up box and got to playing around.
Exactly.
Yes.
I even like the doctor's comments. Do you always play the priest?
Yeah. That was a bit of fourth wall. Yes. And the guards have Darth Vader helmets, by the way. That's the other thing I noticed. Yeah.
Yeah. The doctor also it turns out at this point in the series, the Nazi governor is turning into the kindly Nazi governor. Right. He starts to display more and more kindness, even though he's a Nazi. And so one of the first acts of kindness is it turns out the execution is fake. He's just doing it to learn the truth about the doctor. And the doctor promises that he will free Varos from the Galtron Mining Corporation if he's spared, because he knows how valuable Zeiton 7 is. And so he offers to improve their negotiating position if they let him go. So it turns out the ropes for the hanging were not attached. So they would have fallen a little bit, but not have been strangled. And the doctor knew that, but he still offers to help the Varosians. But he wants the women freed from the mutator, which takes an abnormally long amount of time to turn the thing off. Partly it's because the torture guy, Quillian, the head of programming, really wants to test this mutator thing. And so he's defying orders. But even once the governor gets directly involved, it's like, it's too late. We may as well let him finish mutating. And the doctor finally shoots the machine running this to get it to turn off, as opposed to unplugging it or something.
Right.
And it turns off, and the women revert to human form. So they got him in time.
And by the way, the doctor used a gun to destroy the machine.
Against a machine, though.
Right. Yeah. Quilliam said something along the lines of, "Now tell me exactly how it feels. Be honest. This is for science." Yeah. he done a little bit of a Princess Bride. Nice. Yeah, the vibe there. So, and part of this, like the whole farcical hanging, like they pulled the lever and the doctor and Jandar fell, and you thought they were going to die, and they didn't. That was all precipitated by Syl, who wanted the doctor to be killed because he's starting to see the doctor as a rival or as some sand in the gearworks for his efforts to take advantage of the planet and its mining concessions.
Yeah,
and
meanwhile, Syl is on the phone to his own people trying to get them to invade and take over Varos.
Right, which, why didn't they do that in the first place, I suppose? But and then eventually the governor is usurped by the chief officer, who cites, some legal precedent that is baloney, of course.
Well, no, I thought it was reasonable because, in terms of their law, because you can guess that when a governor is in his waning days, his popularity is going down. He knows he's going to have his fourth encounter with the cellular disintegrator thing soon, and he's going to die. Yep. He's going to try to delay that encounter.
That's
exactly. So they've empowered the chief of security to force a vote.
It's called the 25th Amendment.
Yeah, and so that's what the security chief, who's in Syl's pocket, does. He invokes that principle of Varosian law and forces a vote.
Right, and so we come to this to the climactic moment of the story, where the governor and Perry are being held at gunpoint by that same guard that the doctor and Perry tricked in the beginning, and the governor appeals to him. And at first he doesn't go for it, and so the governor is put into the execution machine, and then the guard has a change of heart.
Him down.
Yes,
they're
he's
voting
being voted
him down, and he's dying. He's dying, but as he's dying, he's telling the people of Varos the truth about their situation, and so he's become not just a kindly Nazi governor, but a virtuous kindly Nazi governor because he's going out as a martyr.
Right. And so the governor has Actually, I think the guard is as much motivated by the idea that he could be the next governor and be in that same chair as of saving the governor. So he destroys the machine, saving himself in one sense.
And by the way, before he's put in the chair, the governor also tries to save Perry and is unable to do so.
Yes. Meanwhile, the doctor's on the run from cannibals, apparently, in the punishment dome. And then and he and Jondar and Areta they come to this area where there's it's overgrown in this corridor, and he says, "Don't touch the tendrils, or you'll die." And then he turns and is brushed by the tendrils. I don't know if you noticed that.
He's a Time Lord. So
yes. So the doctor then tricks Quilliam and the chief officer into touching the tendrils.
Well, he gets them close to the tendrils, and then they've chiefly
tied them back,
hung some of the tendrils, and they release the tendrils, so they swish forward and slap Quillian and the chief guard, and the other people there. So they all instantly die of poison from the tendrils.
Right. And that leaves Syl alone in his efforts to come up with the plot, and he's rebuffed by his own people in his efforts to have an invasion, and they tell him, pay whatever price you have to get the Zeiton 7.
Yeah.
And everyone is happy, and the governor is so grateful he will give the doctor whatever he asked for, and all the doctor asked for is enough Zeiton 7 to get.
Yeah, it's kind of the Syl's people give him mixed messages, because first they tell him, we just found more Zeiton on this asteroid, so we're canceling the invasion. So it's like, okay, it's less needed. Yeah. But then it's urgently needed, so pay the Varosians whatever they want.
Yeah.
Right, so Varos is no longer the only place where it can be found. Well, you think the doctor would have known that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that was a weird. It was. I wasn't sure whether I heard that right.
That ending seemed really slapped onto me. That it's just like, okay, we've got to wrap this up somehow. And, admittedly, I've written a few homilies that sound like that too. It's like, I just got to end it now. Boom, done. So that's kind of what that sounded like.
Maybe what it meant was that some other mining company has found a second source of Zeiton 7. Right. And it's possible. So Galvatron needs to secure its source.
Yeah, because we do know there are other rival companies.
Yeah. Well, and it's possible too that it's as simple as, okay, they found traces, but that doesn't mean that they're anywhere near production.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's of course, when you talk about oil and stuff like that, yeah, they can find there's oil there, but it doesn't mean they're gonna be able to pump it out the next day.
Right. So the result of this newfound wealth is the governor, who has survived again, decides that there will be no more injustice. I will no longer have to be a Nazi bad guy to you. We'll do away with the torture and executions in the punishment dome, and no more mandatory TV watching. Incidentally, no more voting, by the way, because that's how they voted, was through the TV. So, and then Edda and Arak have no idea what they're going to do with their newfound freedom.
Yeah. By the way, the vote through your TV thing, that was like forward thinking back in the 80s. It's like, because I remember the time, it's like, one day we're going to be able to send feedback through our TVs and like pick what programs everyone gets to watch. It's like, no, we're just going to have YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that was about the time that like the phone polls were starting to ramp up, where you could dial 1-900-123-4567 to vote yes, and 1-2-3-4-5-6-7-8 or whatever for no. Those were just starting to ramp up at that point.
That's how Robin got killed. Jason Todd. Batman's Robin.
Batman's Robin. I don't remember
that. They had a phone poll of should the Joker kill Robin or not.
Oh wow!
Oh, interesting. Didn't know that.
And like Socrates, Robin lost by a small margin.
Oh,
ouch! So that's the story. Are there any other show notes or any bit you want to mention, call out on this?
A couple of little things. I liked how after the guard frees the governor and Perry, their solution, it's more self-referential stuff for the show. We've had the running through corridors, so what do? They go into the ventilation ducts to find the doctor. So another classic sci-fi trope, I think, done winkingly for the audience. I also liked at the end just a little bit of business with the governor and the doctor and Perry. as they're leaving, the doctor goes to shake the governor's hand, and he's clearly unfamiliar with the practice.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of fumbles his way through shaking the doctor's hand, but he's quick on the uptake. So he then turns to Perry and realizes I should do this for her too, and shakes Perry's hand.
Right.
And
right.
I like that just little thing. I don't know that was scripted or if the actors came up with it, but I liked how he's unfamiliar, but he's quick on the uptake. Then at the end, at the very end, we have the really self-referential moment where you have the bickering couple at home, and the governor has made his speech, and they announced the end of the torture broadcasts, and they're like, we're free. What should we do? I don't know. And then the TV goes to static, and we have the closing credits.
Right, right. There is something odd about the transcript that I was looking at that has the script of it that had whole scenes and lines from scenes that weren't in what I saw, and I don't know if that means it was the shooting script or if there's multiple versions of this. But there was no explanation that I could see of what this difference was in the. It's this great site called chakotea.net, which has transcripts of every episode of Doctor Who.
It may be because there very well could be deleted scenes because they needed to repackage this for the 4 episode format, and that probably involved some adjustments.
Father Corey, did you have any other thoughts about this episode?
The only other thing I could think of is, if they did this story today instead of the TVs, it would be basically smartphones that they'd be looking at all the time.
And one day we'll be able to interact back through our smartphones and pick which programs we all get to watch on them.
There was an episode. Yeah, right. There was an episode of the Orville that was kind of like this, but it was more about like social media ranking. And
that's right. There was the planet that was basically like contemporary Earth, and
there's an episode of Black Mirror that's the same way, and there's an episode of Community that's the same way with the app Meow Meow Beans on your phone. Leads to a dystopian Logan's Run like stratified society.
Yeah, Jimmy reminded me that I do. One of these days, I need to watch Community. So
same here.
Yeah,
come back and binge watch that. So, all right, great. So I mentioned we have some feedback from folks, and I'm going to talk a little some of it here. We get so much great feedback, especially on our Facebook page, that we really do appreciate it all. We got an email from Kevin Nickerson who was commenting on our episode on the Highlanders. Now, Kevin is a bagpiper, so particular interest in this episode. He mentioned how we said it's important to note, he says, that many independent companies of soldiers were raised by clan chiefs and fought for the government. So there were Scottish clans fighting on behalf of the king, chief among them several which would amalgamate and became known as the Royal Scots. And he says that Jamie McCrimmon was part of the Clan MacLaren, and the McCrimmons were the pipers to the MacLeods, the Clan MacLeod, not Connor MacLeod, maybe Connor MacLeod from Highlander, but that's a whole different show.
Not the bad detective series starring Dennis Weaver from the 70s, MacLeod.
Exactly. So he says the chief of the Clan MacLeod during the battle sided with the government and raised independent companies of Highland troops. So a little hit at the accuracy for Doctor Who on that one, yes. And then he says he pointed out that Bonnie Prince Charlie was not fighting to put himself on the throne, but rather his father James, hence the name Jacobites. So that's a good correction there. So and then on our episode on the Lazarus experiment with the 10th Doctor, Danny Butler on Facebook corrects us. Francine doesn't trust the Doctor because she at one point says he reminds her of her cheating husband, her ex-husband. So for whatever reason, but so yes, that's a good point. Francine,
although we meet her cheating husband and he's nothing like the Doctor.
Yeah, no, I think she just distrusts him because she thinks he's a runaround sort of guy like her husband. But thank you both for your feedback. We really appreciate that. So I think that's it for us on this episode. Before we sign off, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who. And today we want to thank by name Hans G, Anthony M, David G, Gino N, and Rick A. Through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give. They make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the great shows we do at SQPN. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. Tell us what you thought of this episode if you got a chance to watch it, or of our discussion of it. Let us know by visiting sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. You can leave feedback there or send us an email to doctorwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing, like I said, we'll be discussing Blink with the 10th Doctor, one of the favorites episodes of all time, for especially for New Who. Until then, Jimmy Aiken, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom.
Father Corey Stika, thank you as well.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, you'll age here in the TARDIS and then die. Me, I shall go on regenerating until all my lives are spent.
Right. This is going to be fun.